Crews cut down the 75-foot-tall Norway spruce today. Here it was cut down.
A Christmas tree being cut down at a home in Valley Station. It'll soon be loaded onto a truck.
Protect the innocence. Everybody's in such a rush for their kids to experience, to grow. Let them be in the innocence.
Gave us basic commands, we comprehend them clearly. What's the purpose of living? What's the purpose of dying? Who do you believe when everybody is lying? How do you wait fire? Count the sands of the seas. Tell me how many stars throughout the galaxy. Some things only God knows. If questions linger in your mind till your eyes close. But here's something you can understand. Fear Yah and His commands, the duty of man. While you still have a chance, fear Yah and His commands, the duty of man. While you still have a chance, fear Yah and His commands, the duty of man.
I want to thank you all for joining us for this presentation. Christmas on trial, right? There's a lot for us to discuss and unpack here because it's come to our attention that there are those of you who maybe are more fairly new to this walk that need a little bit of extra ammunition when it comes to unpacking why we who refer to ourselves as Israelites by nationality, by heritage, but also practicing Israelites who practice the faith or practice the belief do not participate in Christmas. And it's understandable. I respect it and I understand it. So that's what we're discussing here. I want to thank you. I want to welcome you. Christmas on trial. We'll keep this fairly loose, but the topic is very serious. And I want to put forth some things for you to consider. And I want to ask you some questions. And I want to ask you to evaluate for yourself whether this is something you still want to continue to do, whether or not this is something you still want to actively have your children participate in. And I think with the information that we're bringing forward for you to consider, you can take some of the key elements and the key ideas and defend your position when your family member is inviting you to that Christmas dinner, when your family is inviting you to the holiday festivities, when they're sending gifts to your children, when they're asking you about whether or not you want a tree under your mantle and lights all around your windows, right? So let's start to unpack this, right? What is this time known as? Most people refer to this in the world that we operate in today as the most wonderful time of the year, right? But I question that because the same time of the year is also referred to as the time when depression is at its highest, statistically.
Although it is the holiday season, experts say suicide rates and mood disorders are on the rise this time of year, which is why NAMI of Greater Toledo wants to urge everyone to find support during these cold and cloudy months. Maya May has more this morning on what can help combat seasonal depression.
People overspend and put themselves in debt, most often during this time of the season. Just something to think about. What do we remember about this season? Us who are adults from our childhood, we remember the nostalgia. We remember the sounds. We remember walking into the stores. You remember getting the Sears catalog delivered to your home and flipping through those pages and circling what you wanted from your parents or from Santa, quote unquote, for Christmas, right? We all remember that. And it gives you warm and fuzzies, all of those feelings. But I ask you to consider the fact that that's all propaganda. It's all things that are done in order to trigger that nostalgia. The smells that you smell when you go into the stores, the scents that are sprayed in the air, the holiday cup of coffee that is branded for this time of season, from Thanksgiving to Christmas, so on and so forth, when you stop in at Starbucks. They are pumping you full of the things that trigger your endorphins to say, I have to engage. I have to participate.
The enemy is crafty, so crafty. And what's the odds that he sugarcoated this feast day with presents and getting together with family? That's a great feeling. And food. When you're trying to do the right thing and do what the Most High tell you by not keeping this feast day, you not only have to battle family, you have to battle your own flesh.
The soulful Christmas tunes still give you nostalgia. You remember the tune, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. The movie, the Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life. The shopping, the eating, the drinking, the overindulgence. I want you to think about all of that because that is all part of the tradition. And I want you to say that with me, tradition. And think about whether or not tradition is something we should be continuing in. The fireplace stockings, arguing with your family, all of that stuff, right? Let me ask you this. What does the book that we say we believe in say about tradition? Let's go to the book of Matthew in chapter 7 and read what the Messiah himself, if you believe in the Messiah, as we do. We believe in the Messiah who was crucified, buried, and resurrected on the third day at the right hand of the Heavenly Father with all power and esteem. We believe that. What does Mark chapter 7 say? Let's start at verse 9. It says, and he said to them, well, do you set aside the commandment of Yahuwah, the commandment of Yah, in order to guard your tradition? And we understand what was going on in the background here was a conversation that was being had about why the followers of the Messiah didn't wash their hands. That's the backdrop of what's going on. And he's like, washing their hands, although is not following tradition, they're not breaking command. You break command. Let's go to verse 13. He says, nullifying the word of Yah through your traditions, which you have handed down, and many such traditions you do. And he's telling them, you keeping these man-made traditions, but you're not keeping the law. You're not strictly adhering to the word. And so that's our position on tradition. We're good with tradition that is in line with the word. What we have an issue with is when your man-made tradition deviates from what thus says the Most High. Do we agree? And so, since we're speaking about the tradition of Christmas, Christ Mass, and the most wonderful time of the year, what is this tradition all about? Is it about the birth of the Messiah? Is it about the birth of the one whom most of the world refers to as Jesus, who we refer to by his Hebrew name, Yahusha? Is it about him being visited by the three wise men? And does the scripture even say that he was visited by three wise men? Well, let's start right there, since we're dealing with tradition. Let's dispel a quick, easy myth. You go to the book of Matthew, you'll find that it never said that there was three wise men. So when you're looking at your nativity scenes that people are putting out in front of their homes with the pale skin Gentile Jesus, the Greek Jesus as opposed to the Hebrew Messiah, and they have those three men, what does the book actually say? Well, let's go to Matthew 2. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. The book of Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. And it says, "And Yahusha, having been born in Bethlehem of Yehuda in the days of Herodes the king, see, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem." Didn't say three, said Magi. Verse 2, saying, "Where is he who has been born king of the Yehudim? For we saw his star in the east and have come to do reverence to him." Let's jump to verse 9. "And having heard the sovereign, they went, and see, the star which they had seen in the east went before them until it came and stood over where the child was. And seeing the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And coming into the house, they saw the child with Miriam, his mother, and fell down and did reverence to him. And opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, of frankincense, and of myrrh." Still waiting on that 3. I didn't read it, did you? I read that they presented to him gifts of frankincense, gold, and myrrh, but these are traditional gifts given in our custom, especially back then, to a king. If you came before a king, you did not come without gifts. You did not get an audience with the king without bringing gifts. And so that's what that tradition is. Didn't say there was 3 wise men. Second, this Christmas tradition may have been around before the birth of Messiah. Think about that. The tradition that the world is celebrating now, calling it a celebration of the birth of the Hebrew Messiah, may have been around way before the Hebrew Messiah was ever born.
What does the Heavenly Father say about you worshiping him the way the heathens worship their mighty ones? Because we've already established that this holiday has been around for a very long time. You know what I'm saying? And the originators of this holiday, they wasn't worshiping the Most High with this. It was very wicked. It was a filthy feast day. But you say it ain't no big deal. And I'm here to tell you it is.
How is it then a celebration of his birth? Let's deal with that. Let's deal with that. Because if you're saying it's the tradition of celebrating the birth of the Messiah, the first thing I have to ask you is, do we even celebrate birthdays?
If our Messiah, if our Savior didn't know this would happen, why would he say in Matthew 11 verse 6, "Blessed is he who shall not be offended in me"? When you look up that word offended in the Strongs and in the Braggs, I think, it means trapped, to entice. In order to entice you to keep that wicked feast day, they told you it was the Messiah's birthday.
So then, why do we celebrate Jesus' birth on December 25th? Well, it most likely comes from an old, odd Jewish idea that a prophet would die on the same day he was conceived. And since they believed Jesus was crucified at Passover on March 25th, they believed that that was also the date of his conception. Now do the math. Add 9 months to March 25th, and you get Jesus born on December 25th.
Incarnation and the birth of Christ is, along with Jesus' death and resurrection, the most awesome event in all of human history. Why wouldn't we want to carve out some specific time to celebrate such an amazing event? Why wouldn't we purposefully set aside a chunk of time, like Advent, to build up to the expectation of our coming Savior?
Even though no scripture in the Bible, we have no example of the righteous celebrating their birthdays nowhere in the Bible.
Was December the 25th the birthday of your Lord? It's not the birthday of the Messiah that I believe in and that I reverence or that we reverence. Some would argue that the birth occurred in some other season. Historians, scholars, such as in the fall, during the harvest, think of possibly the ingathering or tabernacles. Followers of this theory claim that the Judean winters were too cold for shepherds to be watching their flocks by night. In addition to assessing the validity of a December 25th birthday for our Hebrew Messiah, let's first establish that we don't get a birth date for him in the scriptures, period. But there are some deities, there are some gods that are worshipped by many other cultures that you can do your own simple Google search and see that they are said to have been born on guess what day? December 25th. Here's some worthy of note. Mithra, Persian, Roman, god of contracts and the sun, celebrated as born on this day, December 25th. Key festival in his cult. Horus, the Egyptian god, the sky god, son of Isis, sometimes linked to a December 25th birth as the son of heaven. Dionysus, and we're going to circle back to a few of these. Greek, known as the god of wine, also said to be born a holy child on this day, with stories of a virgin birth. Attis, Phrygian, and I may be mispronouncing that, the vegetation god born on December 25th to a virgin. Krishna, Indian. Some traditions link his birth to December 25th to the virgin Devaki. Tammuz, Syrian. Some may say Sumerian, fertility god, also listed as born on this date to a virgin. Why was this date chosen? This is interesting. In pagan tradition, December 25th was a popular time for winter solstice celebrations, symbolizing the rebirth of the sun and light after the longest night. Winter solstice simply means that time of the year when the nighttime is the longest in your yearly cycle and the daytime is the shortest. So as the sun is rising to a lower point during this season, it gets to a point where it rises to its lowest point, and then the very next day it starts to rise higher and higher each year. Okay? And so you also have an idea there of the sun on a plane coming down and going back up with a vertical plane crossing it. And there's this idea of this representation for Tammuz as well. Anyway, the Christian adoption. And I'll qualify this by saying we don't consider ourselves Christians. And maybe that's a discussion for another time as to who the early Christians were and who they were not. But an oversimplified way of putting it would be, I don't believe Abraham was a Christian. I don't believe Isaac, Jacob. I don't believe the 12 sons of Jacob were Christians. I don't believe Job was a Christian, right? Although I do believe Enoch, I don't believe they were Christians. Although I do believe they believed in the coming Messiah, they wouldn't have been called Christians. That's a term attributed to a movement that was started by Gentile followers of Messiah. That's the oversimplified version, but we'll get to that in another discussion. So the Christian adoption. Early church leaders designated this day for Jesus' birth to co-opt existing pagan festivals that already existed, festivals that they were already participating in before the coming of the Messiah in the flesh, okay? And appeal to new converts, a lot of times Gentile converts, heathen converts, aligning Jesus as the true Son of Righteousness. And yes, I'm going to go ahead and use Jesus in that definition, because this Greek Gentile pale-skinned Jesus may line right up with what they were introducing. Okay? Has nothing to do with the Hebrew Messiah. Consider a portion of the writing from a very good book that I'll quote a few times here, Fossilized Customs, which I'll put on the screen behind me. In the book by Lou White entitled Fossilized Customs, on page 29, as a reference to Christmas and birthdays, he writes, "The popular celebration of one's annual birthday is acknowledged to be, by all authorities, on an ancient customs, a pagan ritual from Babylon. The Babylonians served the sun, the moon, the planets, and constellations, a Gentile practice condemned by Yahuwah. Learn not the ways of the Gentiles. Birthdays are mentioned in the Tanakh a total of 3 times. When Joseph or Yosef was in prison in Egypt, in Genesis chapter 40, verse 20, in Job chapter 1, verses 4 and 5, and Herod's birthday when Yehochanan or John the Baptist, Yehochanan the Immerser, was beheaded. Matthew 14 and 6. In the situation described in Job, Job sacrificed an animal because he was aware of his children's idolatry, for which they all died when the house they celebrated in collapsed on them in a violent windstorm. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day. In the story of Joseph, the baker was hanged on Pharaoh's birthday, and the Levite, Yehochanan, Messiah's cousin, was beheaded on Herod's birthday. The birthday ritual of cake, candles, wishing, and presents served to give thanks to sky luminaries for allowing the birthday celebrant to reach the annual cycle of their birth. The cake was baked for the Queen of Heaven, Asherah. It was decorated and monogrammed with the celebrant's name. The candles symbolized the sacred fire, carefully numbered for each annual cycle completed. The prayer chanted and the ritual procedure are carefully preserved, and it is a religious occasion. Witches regard one's birthday the most significant event in a person's life. Think about that. Astrologers base everything on it. Who could deny it? You, if you're old enough, remember waking up before you came into the truth and checking your horoscope? That's where this comes from, okay? If the celebrant can blow out all the candles, then a secret wish to a genie or a Juno, if the person is male, will be granted. The birthday itself was a time of great superstition to a pagan, so they were surrounded by their friends, their relatives, for protection. In the Greek culture, it was believed that personal abilities, talents, and things like that were bestowed on an individual by being inhabited or possessed by one or more demons called muses. A person's genius, aka genie in us, was the gift of the genie thought of as the overseer of the muses. And there were 9 female muses believed to endow special skills in speech, art, science, memory, scholastics, agility, and music. These were the daughters of Zeus. And then they go on to name the muses. We don't need that for the purposes of what we're dealing with. But we talked about the winter solstice. How many of you have heard of Sol Invictus? Sol Invictus goes right along with the winter solstice. Let's deal with that. So Sol Invictus, also known as the Invincible Sun or the Unconquered Sun, was the unofficial sun god of the late Roman Empire and a later aspect of or replacement for the old Latin god Sol. The Emperor Aurelian revived his cult in 274 AD and promoted Sol Invictus as the chief god of the empire. From Aurelian forward, Sol Invictus often appeared on imperial coinage, usually sewn wearing a sun crown. Remember that sun crown. And driving a horse-drawn chariot through the sky. Guess they hadn't started drawing the reindeer-drawn chariots through the sky yet. His prominence lasted until Emperor Constantine I legalized Christianity and restricted paganism. Well, we're going to read more about whether or not Constantine actually restricted paganism. The last known inscription referring to Sol Invictus dates to AD 387, although there were enough devotees in the 5th century that the Christian theologian Augustine found it necessary to preach against them. This festival of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, according to some scholars, the Emperor Aurelian instituted it in 274. The festival was known as the birthday of the invisible sun. Guess when that was? You guessed it, December 25th. The date of the winter solstice on the Roman calendar. Now in Rome, this yearly festival was celebrated with a 30 chariot race. And Gary Forsyth, professor of ancient history, says this celebration would have formed a welcome addition to the 7-day period of Saturnalia. And Saturnalia ranged from December 17th to the 23rd. Rome's most joyous holiday season since the Republican times. Saturnalia was characterized by parties, banquets, and exchanges of gifts. Parties, feasts, and exchanging of gifts. So where did your exchange of gifts come from for your December 25th celebration? That's right, Saturnalia. Before Aurelian, the calendar of Antiochus of Athens in the 2nd century AD had marked the 25th of December as the birthday of the sun. But it didn't refer to any religions or religious festival being held on that date. Around AD 238, Censorium had written in De Natali that the winter solstice was the birth of the sun. So again, I told you the winter solstice is just that day on your calendar that we refer to as the shortest day of the year, when the sun is out for the shortest amount of time, and then the very next day begins to raise higher in your horizon. Saturnalia, which is in December, celebrated Saturn, especially in the agrarian age, with role reversals where slaves were honored. They did gift giving, feasting, and winter themes, which influenced Christmas. So in the book Come Out of Her, My People by C.J. Coster, is a book that you should definitely want to have on your bookshelf. It reads, the solarization became even worse in the 5th century when the Messiah was not only called the true Sun, but also the true Apollo, the age-old sun deity of the Greeks. Other paintings and pictures followed, as well as statues of images of the Messiah. And we know that's a no-no in the first place, right? No graved images. With sun rays or a nimbus or sun disk around his head. Remember I told you, remember that sun disk. There are a great number of these illustrations to be found in ecclesiastical books, and I'm sure you guys can think of a lot of them just as I'm reading this. To summarize, because of their inborn heathen custom of sun worship, and because of their anti-Judo beliefs, these Gentiles who led what we now know as Christianity, who took over the belief and set themselves at the head and made themselves teachers of this new thing, in a nominal way, were easily persuaded to accept the true sun, S-U-N, the sun of righteousness, Christ, Helios, true Apollo. Emperor Constantine was the one who put an end to the enmity between frank sun worship, meaning outright sun worship, and the messianic belief, meaning they stopped persecuting the pagans who were worshiping the sun out in the open because they made it okay and said, this is part of what we're bringing in. This is part of Christianity. That's what he did. So when you read in your Google searches and it says he put an end to paganism, no, he put an end to the persecution of pagans. Okay? It says the remarks and concern by Tertullian, Pope Leo the Great, Eusebius, and also by Cyril of Jerusalem testify to this. Cyril contended against this in 348 CE, writing, "Let the heresy be silenced which blasphemes the Messiah, the Son of the Mighty One. Let those be silenced who say that the Son is Messiah, because he is the Creator, not the sun and not the visible sun itself. Is the Creator of the Son." Augustine, who himself previously had been a scholar of the Maccabean Gnostics sect, known for worshiping the sun all day long as it passed through the sky, also compromised but cautioned against the frank sun worship of the Maccabeans and warned, writing, "Eventually we shall yet be taken to the Persians." Remember, they worship Krishna, also born on December 25th. The latter being known for their sun worship and being the place of origin of the Maccabean cult. The unconquered sun, Sol Invictus, Sol Helios, became the conqueror. Paul Schmidt, author of Sol Invictus, ends his article writing, "The religious polity of Constantine characterized itself in a striking manner." How? By the establishment of Dies Solios, Dies Solis, meaning Sunday. Yes, the Lord's Day, as a mutual feast day for the heathen and for the Christians in the year 321. So if you or someone that you love is viewing Sunday as the Sabbath, the Lord's Day, this is the origin, because it revolves around the worship of the sun. Going to Come Out of Her, My People, page 43. Come Out of Her, My People, page 43. We're already there. And it reads, "What is the meaning of the word glory? And why won't you hear us use glory in our videos?" Funk and Wagnall's New Standard Dictionary of the English Language under glory gives the religious symbolic meaning. In religious symbolism, the complete representation of an emanation of light from the person of a sanctified being, meaning light radiating from the body or from the head, consisting of the aureole and the nimbus, and further on, the quality of being radiant or shining, brilliancy, brightness, luster as the glory of the sun, and further on. A sunburst, any ring of light or a halo. And when I say sunburst, what do you think about sun-kissed? The drink we all used to drink? As in being kissed by the sun, or being kissed by the sun god or the sun deity, thereby transferring some of the radiance from himself to the individual kissed, right? The Comprehensive English Dictionary under glory explains it as splendor, as of the sun. Similar statements are made by the Oxford English Dictionary and Webster's New International Dictionary. The later states, glory is the general term of the areola and the nimbus. Yes, you heard that right. Areola being the halo or ring around the sun, and nimbus being the sun disk. This meaning, as well as the word itself, would be acceptable if the commonly used Hebrew words in the Old Testament or even the Greek doxa have had the same meaning of sun radiance or circles of light. However, we don't find the trace of sun radiance or emanation of light in the most common word used in the Hebrew text, mainly kabod, or in the Greek doxa. Once more, we have to realize and awaken to the fact of the adoption of sun worship into what we refer to as the Christian church. The merger of sun worship with the messianic belief in the dictionaries, the encyclopedias, and the ecclesiastical books, we find many illustrations of the Messiah, or who people purport to be the Messiah, I would say more likely Jesus, his mother and the saints encircled with radiant circles of emanations of light around them. Huh? You've seen those before. You may see an example on the screen as I'm reading this to you. Kabod literally means to be heavy or to make weighty, and esteem in its figurative sense, and its noun kabod, to esteem. So when we read that word Glory in the Hebrew text, because we understand that they put their words in our book, we translate it more accurately as esteem, as in the esteem of Yah. Y'all with me? Thus, the ecclesiastical symbolic meaning of the word glory, being that of radiance or emanation of light as from the sun, is strong evidence of the Catholic-headed Christian church solarizing the Hebrew Messiah and his father. The church identified the Heavenly Father, or the highest deity, as a son deity. That's what they identified it as. And that was the prevailing deity of the Roman emperors, the Roman capital, and its empire. So I have to ask you this, is it possible then that what we are recognizing is this festival and this day that's being venerated is another instance of a pagan worship and a pagan practice being pushed on those who consider themselves true and righteous worshipers, those who consider themselves believers in the Bible. Because if you're a strict adherer to the words of the Most High, we don't see that we're supposed to be practicing this. As a matter of fact, I think we're saying that this may come from somewhere else. I think we're seeing that there's been a practice of putting their deities on us and trying to get us to worship their deities, even throughout history. I'll show you. Let's look at the book of Maccabees. Let's go to 1 Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 45. And it reads, Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness, and there was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and aliens, meaning strangers, foreigners, kept the stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob. And the pipe, meaning the flute and the harp, had all ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mizpah over against Jerusalem. For in Mizpah was a place where they had prayed before time in Israel. 47. Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes, meaning they're in mourning. And they laid open the book of the law, your Torah, your Tanakh, wherein the heathen strangers had sought to paint the likenesses of their images. They sought to put their images in our book, even back then. Let's talk about Jesus. Isus, Dionysus, Bacchus. Somebody's going to be upset that I put Dionysus and Bacchus in with Jesus. But let's read about it. If you go to the scriptures in the explanatory notes, and the scriptures is a publication from the Institute for Scriptural Research. Under Jesus, you read this. Consider Isus, rendered as Jesus in English versions up to now. For example, the authoritative Greek-English lexicon of Liddell and Scott, or Liddell and Scott, under IAS, the Greek goddess of healing, reveals that the name IASO is IESO in the Ionic dialect of the Greeks. IESOUS being the contractive genitive form. In David Kravitz's Dictionary of Greek and Roman Mythology, we found a similar form, namely IASUS. There were 4 different Greek deities with the name of IASUS, one of them being the son of Rhea. Further, it is well known that IES is the abbreviated form of the name IESOUS. And Dr. Bullinger in the Apocalypse on page 396 says, IES was part of the name of Bacchus. If we go back to Come Out of Her, My People, the book I referenced also before, page 65. Let me get there with us. Come Out of Her, My People, page 65, as you see behind me here. And it says, we then realized most painfully that our beloved Messiah was identified with the Greek deity Bacchus. By giving the Messiah the surname, or meaning other name, of Bacchus, namely IBS or IES. Bacchus was well known to be a sun deity. Bacchus was also a commonly known name for Tammuz, remember that name, among classical writers. Tammuz, as you will remember, was known to be the young returning sun deity with the birthday of what? You got it, December 25th. Returning in spring, Bacchus, also known as Dionysus, was expressly identified with the Egyptian Osiris, the well-known Egyptian sun deity. Bacchus was also called Ichthys, the fish. Ichthys, and I don't want to go too far left for y'all, but Ichthys the fish is also another name for Dagon. And the priests of Dagon wore a hat on the top of their head that looked like an open fish mouth. Somebody give me a picture as I'm saying this of the Dagon priest and put next to that what the Roman Catholic priests look like. You'll see that the headgear is eerily similar to the headgear of the Dagon priests. And I think you're going to see why. Ichthys, the fish. So yet another group of worshippers of Bacchus, the Roman Catholic Church, the sun deity, alias IES or IHS, were conciliated, were made welcome with the foreign to the Hebrews name of IESOUS, IHSOUS, or IESUS. This most appalling revelation startles most. Indeed, after being enlightened about the solar origin of the word IHS and its fuller form, IHSOUS or IESOUS, we are no longer surprised to find the ecclesiastical emblem IHS. You see it all over the Catholic Church. And every time you see it, it's usually encircled by a sun ray, commonly displayed in church windows. No wonder that we read the testimony of the learned Christian advocate M. Turretin in describing the state of Christianity in the 4th century, saying this: it is not so much that the Roman Empire was brought over to the faith as the faith that was brought over to the Roman Empire, meaning they didn't convert pagans to true and righteous worship. They converted those who were trying to find true and righteous worship over to paganism. Think about that for a minute. Huh? Let that sink in. Not the pagans who were converted to Christianity, but Christianity was converted to paganism. A further witness to this paganization of the Messianic belief is that of Emperor Hadrian, who, in a letter to the Council Syrianus, wrote, there are there in Egypt Christians who worship Serapis, and devoted to Serapis are those who call themselves bishops of Christ. You won't hear us use that term Christ either. I know. You hear Israelites all over the YouTube use Christ freely, as well as Lord. We don't use that either. But I'm showing you where these terms originate and where they come from and how words matter. Okay? Another testimony comes from the letter of Faustus, writing to Augustine and saying, you have substituted your love of feasts for the sacrifice of the pagans, for their idols, your martyrs, whom you serve with the very same honors. You appease the shades of the dead with wine and feasts. You celebrate the solemn festivals of the Gentiles, their calends, meaning calendars, their solstices, and to their manners. Those you have retained without any alteration. Nothing distinguishes you from the pagans except whatever he goes on to say. We see the same thing today, y'all. We see the same thing today. As a matter of fact, I think you will find that a lot of the saints that the Catholic Church wears necklaces dedicated to and rings dedicated to is a direct correlation with what we just read. They're dead. They're deities. You put a saint on the front of their name, and now you're worshiping them. Those who walk with Messiah did not require worship. Okay? Another book you should have on your bookshelf is a book called Two Babylons. I have it here. I'll show it to you. But I've got an excerpt from there, page 136. I think it's on the bookshelf behind me over there. The Two Babylons, page 136. There are letters on the wafer that they give you in the Catholic ceremonies, worth reading. These letters are IHS. What mean these mystical letters? To a Christian, these letters are represented as signifying Iesus Hominum Salvator, Jesus, the Savior of men. But let a Roman worshiper of Isis, yes, there were Roman worshipers of Isis, for in the age of the emperors, there were innumerable, meaning you couldn't count them, worshipers of Isis in Rome. Cast his eyes upon them, and how will he read them? He will read them, of course, according to his own well-known system of idolatry. Isis, Horus, Seb, that is the mother, the child, and the father of the gods. There's your Trinity. In other words, the Egyptian Trinity. Can the reader imagine that this double sense is accidental? Surely not. The very same spirit that converted the festival of the pagan Oannes into the feast of the Christian Joannes, retaining at the same time all its ancient paganism, has skillfully planned the initials IHS to pay the semblance of a tribute to Christianity, while paganism in reality has all the substance of the homage bestowed upon it. Who is Bacchus? You guys familiar with Bacchus? Bacchus is the Roman name for the Greek god Dionysus, deity of wine, revelry, fertility, ecstasy, and theater, known for inspiring frenzy and freedom from inhibition through drink and dance. Get drunk. Blame it on alcohol. Often depicted with grapes, ivy, and a pine-topped staff, like the pine tree, worshipped with wild rites by his followers, Medes, or Maenads, and Satyrs. While associated with joyful intoxication, Bacchus could also bring madness and vengeance if crossed, representing a duality of liberating joy and destructive chaos.
Broke out over the discounted televisions. All of this ended with police taking one woman down there.
The fights at the family tables, the stress that people deal with. Family members get drunk and telling it like a TI is. With this cult central to ancient Greek drama and Roman festivals like prohibited or the prohibited Bacchanalia. What's Bacchanalia? Linked to Dionysus, it honored Bacchus, the wine ecstasy god, with wild, secretive, ecstatic rites, often deemed scandalous. Saturnalia, a widely public, week-long winter party, whereas Bacchanalia was a more intense, more secretive, cultic celebration of wine and frenzy. Both of these celebrations, Bacchanalia and Saturnalia, happen during the same season of the year. You'll see notes of Saturnalia and Bacchanalia in the Christmas tradition. It's just that the occult understanding, in other words, those that understand the pagan origins, are the ones who are part of the ancient mystery rites. They're practicing it in its original form. You're practicing it in its watered down form. Is that what you intend to do when you go Christmas shopping and buy these gifts for your children and your family? Or accept the gifts for your children and your family? The Nimrod and Tammuz connection, the Asherim, the wreaths, and the groves. Let's look at the book of Ezekiel, chapter 8, verse 14. The book of Ezekiel, chapter 8, verse 14 reads, "Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the master's house, which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz." Ezekiel is before the birth of the Messiah. What they were doing in the book of Ezekiel happened before the birth or the coming of the Messiah in the flesh. Would you agree? Yet there was some kind of veneration of this same deity even back then. I don't think you could successfully convince me, knowing that this is about the birth of the Messiah, even if celebrating his birth like that was permitted. The Two Babylons, page 106. Two Babylons, page 106. And it reads, "It is remarkable that a festival attended with all the essential rites of the fire worship of Baal is found among pagan nations in regions where most remote from one another. About the very period of the month of Tammuz, the Babylonian god was anciently celebrated. Among the Turks, the fast of Ramazan, which says herd, begins on the 12th of June, is attended by an illumination of burning lamps. This Tammuz worship is synchronized with Baal worship." Is that what I just read? Lou White's Fossilized Customs, pages 38 to 41. And I'm going to skip around just a little bit here, y'all, but stay with me. Let's go down to where it speaks about Asherah. Asherah, the Christmas tree connection. Baal and Asherah. The Sun King and his consort. Asherah is known in scriptures as the Queen of Heaven. Should we be dealing with the Queen of Heaven, y'all? I know some brews do, but should we be? What does scripture say about it? And it's called Artemis by the Ephesians in the book of Acts chapter 19. The word Asherah is found at least 40 times in the Tanakh and refers to a wooden object used in the worship of a consort of Baal. You see it on your screen. The image of Asherah was a tree used by the pagan Canaanites and the Sidonians. One of these pagan Sidonian individuals was Jezebel, who married Ahab, king of the northern tribe, the Samaritan king. The northern Israel was in apostasy, being led into rebellion by their leadership, and violated the covenant of Yahuwah, and they added an 11th commandment saying that you shall worship Yahuwah your Elohim on Mount Gerizim. Note that this is one of the topics of the conversation between Yahusha and the Samaritan woman at the well in John 4. The northern tribes began to worship the Baals or the Balaim, consisting of Baal and Asherah. influenced by the king Ahab's Sidonian wife Jezebel. Such tree worship, you thought it was only in Jeremiah, didn't you? Such tree worship was put under the ban. Yet the 10 northern tribes failed to carefully guard Yahuwah's commandments or declarations. Asherah became the deal breaker, and the northern tribes were taken away into the nations. Asherah worship became the deal breaker. They got the 10 tribes carried off into the other nations. Think about that. They remain so now after 2,700 plus years. Look, and we're still doing videos and conversations teaching that we should not be partaking in this practice. When northern Israel was dispersed into the nations by the Assyrians in 722 BCE, they carried this tree custom with them. The lost tribes of dispersed Israel have preserved one of their most cherished pagan customs among them, the Christmas tree, or the Asherah. If you were brought up with this custom, you're most likely descendant from one of these tribes. I agree. I don't know if Lou knew exactly what he was saying. Even if it was just doctrinally. You were taught to practice an ancient Phoenician form of idolatry and never even knew it. Asherah was the queen of heaven. See Jeremiah chapter 7 and 44. We'll talk about it a little bit. There are some pictures you may be familiar with. That tree is symbolic of a phallus. The wreath on your door is symbolic of a womb. This is a husband and wife God. What do you think we're replicating with the tree and the wreath? I'll wait, but I'm sure you get where that's going.
When you dissect all these religions and when you break it down, it always come back to Semiramis, Tammuz, and Nimrod worship.
Fertility worship. This is idolatry that deals with fertility worship. Let's go to Jeremiah 7. Verse 18, it reads, "The children gather wood. The fathers kindle the fire. The women knead their dough to make cakes to the queen of heaven, to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger." Jeremiah 44 and 17. "But we will certainly do whatever thing goes out of our own mouth, to burn incense to the queen of heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done. We, our fathers, our kings, our princes in the cities of Judah," you defiling the whole city, "and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well off, and we didn't see any evil." We was kicking it. We was exchanging gifts. We was getting drunk. We was doing our thing. Well, I'm sorry. Not sorry. Because now you know better. So you must do better. Now you know better. So you have to do better. And you have to teach better for your children and your family members. Yahuwah distinctly warns Israel, I'm on page 39, distinctly warns Israel not to erect Asherah next to his altar, nor bring a detestable thing into our house. Even though you may not remember what it represented long ago, Yahuwah hasn't forgotten at all. He does not change. Agreed. Salakia. Salakia. Asher is a Hebrew term meaning happy. The word is used as a proper noun, the father of the tribe of Asher. This term was modified and became the word Asherah, a proper name used by pagans for the female consort of Baal. This was a Celtic deity as well. Baal Asherah worship is clearly seen during the time of Elijah or Eliyahu, when 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah assembled at Mount Carmel. Y'all remember that story? You remember how that turned out? Elijah challenged them to decide whether Yahuwah is power or Baal. and his consort Asherah. If you look at the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 12, verses 2, you read, "We shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which you will possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains and upon the hills and under every green tree." What you think they were doing under those trees? What do you think the tree symbolized? Because we just read about it. Let's go to 1 Kings. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 14, verse 23. 1 Kings chapter 14, verse 23, it says, "For they also built them high places and images and groves on every high hill and under every green tree." 2 Kings. You got several witnesses here, family. Chapter 16 and verse 4. It says, "And he sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places and on the hills and under every green tree." What are they doing under these green trees? Who are they worshiping? Because it's not the worship of the Almighty Yah. And it definitely ain't about Messiah, because he hasn't even been born in the flesh yet. He has not come in the flesh. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 10. "And they set them up images and groves in every high hill and under every green tree." Once again, 2 Chronicles 28 and 4. "He sacrificed also and burnt incense in the high places and on the hills and under every green tree." Last one. Isaiah 57 and 5. "Inflaming yourselves with idols, inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree." I told you this is fertility rites for those who understand the ancient mystery, occult part of this worship. "Slaying the children in the valleys." Slaying the children in the valleys was part of this worship, family. "Under the cliffs of the rocks." If you look at the Strong's Concordance for that tree, you'll get H6086. H6086 for that evergreen tree. Let's read it. "From H6095, a tree from its firmness, hence wood, plural sticks, carpenter, gallows, helve, pine." So we're definitely talking about an evergreen, like we saw in the image before. We're definitely talking about an evergreen, like what they sell you at the Christmas tree farms, okay? This is pine trees. In 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 7, it says, "And he set a graven image of the grove." Of the grove. Well, that grove comes from the Hebrew Strong's Concordance H842. And that grove is Asherah. That's Asherah. From H833, Asherah or Astarte. Who is Astarte? Astarte is the Phoenician goddess. Some say akin to Semiramis. Also an image of the same grove. An image of that grove will be an image of Astarte. Are y'all with me? Do we really want to be doing this? Page 40. Oh, come out of her, my people. "All these things have been thrown together in a big stinky stew, a cup of abominations. The harlot teaches them to her subjects, keeping them in a drunken stupor by making them all drink from the cup every week on Sunday, or every holiday at your Thanksgiving and Christmas celebrations." Ephesians chapter 5, 5-14. "For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person such a man is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Hamashiach and of Yahuwah. Let no one deceive you with empty words. For because of such things, Yahuwah's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. For you were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Master. Live as children of light. For the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Master. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. That's what we're doing here. So I'm skipping down a little bit. It reads here, so Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, how long would you waver between two opinions? I think that's interesting. If Yahuwah is power, follow him. But if Baal is power, then follow him. And I think we're kind of posing the same thing to the viewers here. If Yahuwah is who you worship, then that's what you got to do. The things that Yahuwah tells us to do. And the things that he specifically says don't do, we cannot waver between these two opinions, right? The round wreath symbolizes the sun. At the same time, it also symbolizes the moon. Both thought of as symbols of fertility to the pagans. The sun was male, but his symbol was that of the female. The vertical tree was decorated with the male symbols of fertility, testes, balls. Literally, I'm not being cheeky. But, I believe pun was intended here. Yet was the image of the female connecting the heavens to the earth. This consort, Salakia, of Baal was worshipped as Asherah, Astarte, Artemis, Athena, Isis, Gaia, Nana, Astaran, Ostara, Esther, Easter, Aphrodite. It goes on and on. Ashtoreth, Ishtar, Diana. It depends on the culture, right? Depending on the culture and the name and the language. This tree was named Asherah in the Hebrew scriptures, and her worship continued as we see recorded in the book of Acts, chapter 19. She's still worshipped by today's Wiccans. She's still worshipped by today's Wiccans and other Earth Mother cults. So be careful getting into that Mother Earth stuff. Be careful getting into that Mother Earth stuff. Be careful getting into that God as a woman stuff. Because I would have to ask you then, well, what's her name? Is she the Queen of Heaven? Because I read scriptures about her. And whether or not we should be dealing with that. The round ornaments represented the testes as mentioned and have also come to be known as witch balls. Fertility symbols abound in nature worship. Throwing rice at weddings in ancient cultures represented semen. Well, there you go for that. And so on and so forth. Skipping to Jeremiah 10. This is a well-known one when we're trying to understand that we should be practicing this yearly ritual. Jeremiah 10, chapter 1. It reads, hear the words which Yahuwah speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says Yahuwah, do not learn the way of the nations, and do not be awed at the signs of the heavens. For the nations are awed at them. They're scared because the nights are getting longer. It was an agrarian society. They were praying in the days of light again. They wanted the spring to come back faster. For the laws of these people are worthless. For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the craftsman, with a cutting tool. They beautify it with silver and gold, balls, we just read. They strengthen it with nails and hammers, so that it does not topple. Back in the day, when we were young, and yes, I'm telling my age, we had that red and green dish that you put the tree end and you twist the screws a little bit this way, a little bit this way so that the tree doesn't topple, literally. You want it more straight up or erect, the phallic symbol, then you twist the screws on the other side and you get back up this way. And those who left it up to New Year's, it may have started drooping down again. It became flaccid. And you had to go get it back up again. You twist the screws. You had to add a little water in it, juice it back up in the pan at the bottom because it got a little dry and the pine needles started falling off in your house. Y'all remember those days, right? They strengthen it with nails and hammers. You can't say this is not the same ritual. You cannot read this and say this is not the same ritual. They're like rounded posts. They do not speak. They have to be carried because they do not walk. Don't be afraid of them, for they do no evil, nor is it in them to do any good. Now, somebody will vainly or wickedly reason this and say, well, see, you say they can't do any harm. Why not do it? It's for the kids. Well, if your kids run your household, we need to do another video about that. Because you're supposed to be teaching them. They're not supposed to be running you. And I say that with the most love and affection that I can muster. You're supposed to be teaching your children. Your children are not supposed to be running you.
I've found that children handle it the best. It's adults. Most of the time, if you're just honest with your children and you sit your children out and you show them the wicked nature behind this holiday, they'll beat you stopping. It's the adults. It's once children hear adults saying, oh, why you doing that to them babies? And you don't know. Listen, learn to rebuke them voices. Learn to rebuke the voices. This is a race. This is a race for your soul. And these demons ain't playing. And Yah's angels, Malachim, ain't playing. They are ministering. They are putting out the truth. Just like the demons are whispering and trying to get you to, nah, it's for the kids. Don't listen to them. It's presents. So-and-so them gonna be there. They ain't seen your new car yet. You know what I'm saying? I'm telling you. Those are demonic voices.
There's none like you, O Yahuwah. You are great, and great is your name in might. So here now Jeremiah is making distinction between who that tree represents and the worship the tree represents and the Heavenly Father. He's saying you have power. Who in their right mind, I'm adding that, would not fear you, O sovereign of the nations? For this is your due. For among all the wise men of all the nations and all their kingdoms, there is none like you. And remember, in those days, a lot of the wise men in those nations who ruled were deities or deified at the very least. Some of them may have been Nephilim. But they are both brutish and foolish. And instructions of worthlessness is the tree. Vanity. Silver is beaten into plates. It's brought from Tarshish, meaning it's the good tree decorations. You know, you go find, remember when you were still worshiping this Christmas celebration, you go find the expensive decorations for your tree. People will have competitions in their neighborhood to see who can spend the most money to light their house up. Who can have the biggest nativity scene. Gold from Uphaz, the works of the craftsman, and the hands of the smith, draped in blue and purple. All of them are the work of skilled ones. But Yahuwah is truly power. He is the living power and the everlasting sovereign. At his wrath, the earth shakes, and nations are unable to stand his displeasure. Say to them this, the power that did not make the heavens and the earth shall perish from the earth and under the heavens, meaning Asherah, well, her days are numbered. In Come Out of Her, My People, page 41, he reveals to you that the initiated know the secrets. The tree, the ornaments on the Asherah tree has specific meaning to them. And we talked about that. But you also get, let me slide the slide here for you. You also get from this same practice the Maypole celebration. Some older people may remember that, as well as some of these practices are where the witches' hat originate from. But let's move on. So let's talk about this Baal worship. Remember, there was a connection between Baal and Tammuz. And this Baal worship included a practice of sacrificing children. I read that to you, remember? So let's talk about passing your children through the fire, sacrificing your children to Baal and Moloch. So who is Baal? Baal, Nimrod, and the stag god refers to traditions linking the biblical hunter king Nimrod with the pagan deity Baal, portraying him as a powerful ruler who was later deified as a sun fertility god after his death, often associated with evergreen trees, the pine trees, and winter solstice celebrations, symbolizing a counterfeit worship system that arose from the Tower of Babel. That's how far this goes back. From the Tower of Babel, and became the root of Mystery Babylon. Again, ancient mystery teachings. Ancient mystery teachings. In some Christian and Jewish lore, he is seen as a hunter of souls, using charisma, like being jolly and laughing all the time, to turn people from the Most High, establishing a false religion with his wife and his mother, who are one and the same, and called Semiramis, or what I tell you, Ishtar. Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 5 says, "And have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons with fire, for sending offerings to Baal, which I did not command or speak, nor did it come to my heart." Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 25 says, "And they built the high places of Baal, which are in the valley of Hinnom, to offer up their sons and their daughters to Molech, which I did not command them, nor did it come into my heart that they should do this abomination to make Judah sin." Why am I bringing up child sacrifices in relationship to Christmas? The book of Psalms, chapter 106, verse 37 says, "They slaughtered their sons and their daughters to demons." 38. "And they shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they slaughtered to idols, the idols of Canaan, of the land that was defiled with blood." Well, there's a relationship between the Queen of Heaven, Ishtar, Semiramis, her husband, who is also her son, Nimrod, and that stag god. The representation of the phallus. Whose phallus is that? That's his phallus. So there's a relationship there between him, who the ancient practice of sacrificing your children to, has a relationship between him and who you are sending your children to get those gifts. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Fossilized Customs, page 206. Fossilized Customs, page 206. In this excerpt, he makes a mention of Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. And that's the verse where you find Lucifer, son of the morning, or in the Hebrew text, O Heliel, son of the morning. How have you been cut down to the ground, you who laid waste to the nations? You have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens, like Satan claws. Let me raise my throne above the stars of Yah. Let me sit in the mount of meetings on the sides of the north. Let me go up above the heights. Let me be like the Most High. And it reads, the words above describe the aspirations of the adversary. We clearly see that he desires to sit enthroned where his worshipers can come to him and make their requests. He wants to go up into the heavens and sit in the mount of meeting in the north. No doubt, riding in the sleigh pulled by flying horned stag, representing the stag god. This is the modem, or the modus operandi, the MO, for Moloch. Parents eagerly bring their children to him. In the operation of this child's sacrifice, the hands of the image holding the child were raised to the mouth as if Moloch were eating, and the children fell into the fire where they were consumed by the flames. The people gathered before the Moloch were dancing on the sounds of flutes and tambourines to drown out the screams of their victims. That's diabolical. Moloch's consort was Asherah, the same as the Asherah that we refer to as the tree symbology. This brought forth at the time of the year when the sun was to be reborn, hence the solstice indication, meaning the sun has gone down, it's close to the earth, it's going to be symbolic of death, and then it's going to be resurrected. So you see how they amalgamated that S-U-N worship and tried to mix and mingle it with the worship of the S-U-N. Okay? Moloch was the fire god. He was worshipped as the S-U-N. The children sacrificed to him were believed to help keep the sun's fire burning brightly, especially during the dark times of the year. So we have here some pictures of Moloch, and this belly that they put the children in is where you get the term the belly of the beast from. They would put their children in that belly, which was a furnace, a fire. They literally fed their children to this furnace of this horned, stag-godded beast. Okay? Moloch and Baal are adjacent deities. Okay? So let's talk about Yuletide gatherings. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Christmas song. It's probably one of the most memorable songs during this time of the year. And no one gave a more nostalgic rendition in our community, that is, other than Nat King Cole. And in it, there's a line that goes, Yuletide carols being sung by a choir, folks dressed up like Eskimos. You remember that, right? But what do we know about you? In this song that people play on the radio during a soulful Christmas holiday season that speaks about Yule and Yuletide carolers, what do you know about Yule? Or are we talking about something and practicing something that we have no idea how diabolical it is? Here's Yule. Yule is an ancient Germanic Norse winter festival celebrated around, you guessed it, the winter solstice, December 21st, depending on where you are, through December 25th. That marks the shortest day and the rebirth of the sun, the rebirth of the S-U-N, and the promise of spring's return, involving traditions like feasting, evergreens, and the Yule log, gift giving, many of which influenced modern Christmas. While contemporary pagans and Wiccans still observe it as a time of reflection, renewal, and celebrating the return of light, you just simply thinking you keeping Christmas. Yule is one of the oldest winter solstice festivals, with its origins among the ancient Norse thousands of years ago. Its roots are complicated, difficult to trace, although there are several theories about how and why the festival was celebrated. It's generally agreed that Yule celebrations began a Norse festival called Jol. Although assessments of the purpose and traditions vary, like most winter solstice festivals, themes of light, fire, feasting are common threads. Some historians think that sacrifices were an important part of the observance. I'll read that again. Some historians think that sacrifices were an important part of the observance. I think they're saying something here. Either to the gods or other supernatural beings, like Nephilim perhaps, such as elves, or to the dead, or both. In the harsh climate of Northern Europe, most cattle were slaughtered because they could not be fed during the winter. Meat, therefore, was plentiful for a mid-winter feast to leave out as an offering. Really? Was it only cattle they were sacrificing for meat? Or is there some connection with this stag god? Some contend that the original festival was a sort of Norse Day of the Dead, with the god Odin as a major player. One possible remnant of pre-Christian Yule, one possible remnant of pre-Christian Yule, so what are you celebrating, is the Yule log. Still popular today. You've seen it. You go into your bakery section of your deli, of your market, and you see this cake that's round and it's about this long. And the icing in it, when you look on the inside, looks like a circle, circling all the way to the middle, like a log, like the rings inside of the log. That cake is a Yule log cake. You buy it, you eat it, you didn't even know what it was. Still popular today in Europe, although usually in an altered form. The original Yule log was a large log, tongue twister, that burned throughout the entire multi-day festival for as many as 12 days. On the 12th day of Christmas, who is the true love? And what are they giving to you? A popular modern take on the Yule log is a roulade-styled cake decorated to look like a log. So was it meat on the log? Is that why you celebrating it now as a cake and you're eating it? Because you was putting meat on the log? So here's some of the pagan origins that go into the Yule log sacrifice or the Yule log celebration. Winter solstice. Yule celebrated the winter solstice, the return of light and the sun's rebirth, a common theme in many ancient cultures. Symbolic sacrifice. The Yule log, a large log burned in the hearth, served as a powerful symbol, a stand-in for human or animal sacrifice, made to appease gods for good fortune, bountiful harvest, and protection. Community and ritual. Families would gather, anoint the log with wine or spices, tell stories, and burn it for days, with a portion saved for next year. And evolution. By the medieval period, the bloody aspects had faded, so the child sacrifice, we don't really literally child sacrifice children anymore in the pop culture version of this celebration, which you call Christmas. So the bloody aspects faded, becoming a festive, protective charm. Though its pagan origins, its occult origins remain. And yes, children still disappear around this time of year. From Halloween through Thanksgiving and up through Christmas. Statistically, child abductions go up. The Yule log itself evolved from these practices, shifting from potential, though debated, human sacrifice to symbolic offerings of a log, decorated and burned for good luck, bringing the community together for feasting, for storytelling, with remnants of the old beliefs like shaving ashes for fertility. The idea of child sacrifice is strongly linked to biblical warnings against Canaanite worship of Molech and some pagan tree worship, your Christmas tree. Historical evidence directly tying Yule log ritual to child sacrifice is weak, so they say, but we just read it. We read it from the scriptures, and we read it from historical evidence of what Yule is, relying more on interpretations of broader pagan rites and moralizing counts, so they say. Let's go to the book of Acts chapter 7, verse 43. It says, "Yea, you took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, figures which you made to worship them." Stars, figures. Remember, hands of the smith or the workman? You made stars to worship them. They represented your gods Remphan and Moloch. "And I will carry you away beyond Babylon because of your wickedness." I'm adding that. In the book of Amos, chapter 5, verse 26, we read something very similar. It says, "You have borne the tabernacle or the temple of your Moloch and Chiyun, images, the star of your God, which you made yourselves. Therefore, I will send you in exile beyond Damascus, and Yahuwah, the power of hosts, is his name." Therefore, I will send you in exile beyond Damascus, says Yahuwah. Power of hosts is his name. So, when you read what we just read in the book of Acts, I want you to look at this last slide I have here. When you read what you just read in the book of Acts chapter 7 and the book of Amos, those are the stars that are referenced. You see there what Wiccans and pagans refer to as the talisman of Saturn. One is a 5-point star and one is a 6-point star. Both of these are representative of those deities, whether Molech or whether Baal, whether the deity that is referred to as the bisexual deity, the one that you see that has the horns and breast and a phallus, or whether this other one. And so when you put the star at the top of your Asherim tree and you hang the balls from it with a wreath on your door, symbolic of the stag god, the male phallus and the female reproductive organs, then you go and you hang your lights outside in your window, which is a known symbol in the occult world for welcoming this deity into your home, whether you're entering through your chimney or however you're getting in. Then you put those gifts under the tree to entice your children to go and prostrate before it. I'm asking you, is this about the birth of the Hebrew Messiah? Or is this a replication of the ancient tradition of child sacrifice.
Abba Yah spoke, the first commandment he spoke concerning men was, let us create man in our image. Do you think that's going to be an easy thing? Absolutely not. This whole first existence, this whole first life is it's a simulation. It's like a, now let's see who's going to make it and who's not. Who's going to have the discipline and the obedience to become in my image, and who's not? Why do you think the adversary and these demons and stuff are allowed to throw these temptations in there? Because they are a part of the simulation. They don't make it to the next round. They don't. This is it for them. This is it. And their job is to get you to get stuck in this round too. Everybody don't make it past this round, get thrown into the fire. And one of those tests, I guarantee you, is how well you can fight your flesh. How well you can stand for the Most High. I know it's tough. It's tough dealing with family. You know, it's tough. You know, my family gonna look at me a certain way if I don't show up to the Christmas. Let them look. Let them look. You stand for righteousness. There are beings watching you. The Messiah tells us, who is my brother? Who is my father? Who is my family? But those who do the will of the Most High, who do the will of Yah. That's all that should matter. Whether or not your actions are pleasing the Most High. If you can't stand on that, then those beings that are recording you, they're saying, what family thought meant more to this contestant than being obedient to the Most High. Check. I guarantee you don't make it to the next round. Think on that.
Listen, I want to thank you guys for asking for this presentation. I want to thank you for your likes on our channels. Share the information if you think it's worth sharing. And I want you to go back and review this. And our prayer is that this emboldens you during the season. It strengthens you. It gives you the ammunition you need to defend your position of belief. If you say you believe in the Bible, if you say you believe in the Hebrew Messiah, and you don't want to deal with that nonsense, and you don't want your children being sacrifices, or having your children acting out sacrifices to these pagan deities, I pray this is helpful for you. I want to thank you guys for your time, and we bid you shalom. Y'all bless.